Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of the Popstarian podcast. Today we have a special guest called Dirty Spaceman, straight from the International Space Station, coming to us live with fresh thoughts on a manga anime visual novel series called Umineko no naku koro ni, also known as When the Seagulls Cry, also known as Umineko, When They Cry, also known as When They Cry 3 and 4, by the author Ryukishi07, also known as Dragon Knight 07, because he was born in 2007. And let's have you introduce yourself. I just introduced you, but say hi, okay?
Hi. I'm happy to be here. Fresh off the ISS. You know, it's a busy place. Yeah, I'm Dirty Spaceman. I don't know who's gonna be listening to this. What do they care
My
about?
YouTube channel. I guess they care about Sivagan, yeah, music.
I'm a pretty normal dude. And I'm like a software developer in the IRL land. And yeah, I'm just a chill Canadian lad who's happy to talk about some enjoyable media experiences here today.
Yes, indeed. And so just like last time, I was talking about Outer Wilds with Spectacu. We're going to talk about some good media here, and at least I think we both think it's good media. We might have some different opinions. We might have some differing opinions about some things, but I think in general we both enjoyed it. So I think with Outer Wilds, most people who are watching the video probably knew what Outer Wilds is, but I feel like some people here, it's a little, it's a different scene, so I'll set up. So Umineko is a sort of visual novel or sound novel, as the author calls it, from 2007, between that and 2010, released in 8 parts, 8 episodes, kind of like novel-sized pieces, and it's basically, I'm not gonna be able to explain it perfectly because obviously we're gonna get into spoilers rather quickly. So for the most part, people who are listening to this already know what it is. But for those who are uninitiated, please don't spoil yourself. It's really good. It's basically riffing on Agatha Christie's like mystery novels with some anime fantasy tropes put in, but it's using them to kind of subvert and examine a very interesting personal narrative through the lens of a mystery, through the lens of fantasy, through the lens. It's got layers, okay? It's like Shrek, you know. He's got layers.
I love that
too.
guy.
Yeah, and so let's briefly, just like last time, get a bit of background on how we discovered it. So just shortly, I finished reading it about a year and a half ago. I read it throughout the first half of 2021, while Spaceman here read it just recently, by the end. Wait, last month or by the end of last year? I forgot.
I started it in mid-September of 2022, and I finished it, I want to say, late January of 2023.
Yeah, I think it was late January. So recently from the point of recording this, which is late February. And so basically our community that we're a part of, there's a lot of people who have been enjoying Umineko for a while and talking about it and fixating on it. So we've both been aware of it for a while. And I started reading it. It was kind of like my next kind of longer series that I read after I finished The Wheel of Time in 2020. So I took some breaks between reading it. We can talk about that later on, because there's a sort of thing where the way you read it actually kind of matters, your sort of thought process and everything, because it is written to be sort of read with an active mind for trying to figure out what's going on behind the scenes of the story. And So it took me about half a year to read because of that. I read stuff in between, but towards the end, the last half of the story, I kind of read in succession over the summer break because I was so engrossed in it. And I believe you kind of heard of it from the same community, and you had the same motivations for reading it, which is to say, good people recommended it, so might as well.
Pretty much, yeah. I
Right.
mean, it's for me, if enough people recommend something and people are talking about it and sharing things about it, that alone is usually enough to get me interested in trying something. It won't push me over the edge to actually try it. Well, the thing that usually does that is that I've heard or what I know about it reflects stuff that I'm think I'd be interested in. Like I knew from what I gathered that Umineko was sort of mystery related, that there's a lot of interesting things to try to solve as you read it. Um, Tried a lot of logic puzzles, and so hearing that on top of all the people that just said how great it was and how much they enjoyed it and how big of a you know monumental piece of media it is, all that combined for me to be like, all right, you know what? I'm going to check this out someday. So it was actually around over a year ago. I want to say Steam Winter Sale, late 2021, that I actually bought the game, the two parts of it on Steam. And I said, okay, I'm going to play this eventually. And then so it was not until the fall of 2022 that I said, all right, let's give this a go. But I knew I was going to play it for a while or read it, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it's I think reading it is probably although it is an audiovisual product, you probably do spend most of your time reading it and just click into the next part because uh, yes. So before we get to the spoilers, because I do think it's really kind of hard to discuss this without just putting a massive spoiler warning and then just getting into the nitty gritty. Just before the people who might be interested in it check out, let's give our like overall thoughts and recommendations of it, kind of in a general way. And so for me, I was I was genuinely surprised by how like sort of high quality the writing was. Like it's in a way where it's like it has kind of like Hideo Kojima energy, in my opinion, where it's like the author is clearly very passionate, very engaged with what they're writing. They have clear themes they want to convey, but they're also kind of insane and don't adhere always to the common Western beliefs of what is cool, what is like conventional storytelling, and how things should be told and what characters should be like, if that makes sense. I feel like that you can, if anyone has played the Metal Gear Solid games, they can kind of feel that sort of thing where it's like you have like these sections and ways of writing and like dialogue that feels quite unique in a very campy but lovable way, where it's like the author is clearly doing something very earnest, and the sort of like unconventional nature of the dialogue almost makes it seem even more sort of genuine because it feels very unique. It's a little hard to describe without like giving examples, but I think like a lot of the action in the story, and like the way a lot of the excitement is written is sort of like done intentionally in a very tongue-in-cheek way, where the literal meaning of what is being said sometimes falls to the away from the forefront, so to say, and you have to kind of read it more for the mood and the energy that is being given through the metaphors. And I'm always a sucker for that personally, and just in general, like I was a little I doubted in the beginning whether or not this story could stay engaging and just be rewarding to read for the whole 8 episodes or 8 novel-sized episodes that it is during the first couple of episodes that I was reading, but it really does stay together, in my opinion. Like the whole way through, it was very rewarding, and I was surprised by how thoughtful and earnest and philosophical too at times it could be, because I of course have a sort of general aversion sometimes to sort of manga slash anime style storytelling, perhaps unjustified, sometimes perhaps justified, but I didn't go into this expecting to walk out with one of my favorite literary works that I've experienced so far. And I always feel like I have to defend that somehow, because it's like, how can I, I'm no weeb, I read books. I read The Wheel of Time, I read House of Leaves, I read classics, I know my literature. So don't think that I'm just a weird weeb. But it's like, I shouldn't have to defend it. Like, I love it. It's really great.
Yeah.
So what about you?
So for me, I guess my takeaway would be that it's a challenging and interesting piece of media, especially um, it's probably most like I feel like the type of person who this would be instantly the perfect piece of media for is someone who is both familiar somewhat with visual novels and visual novel tropes, and someone who's familiar with mystery novels and mystery novel tropes. Now, I'm marginally familiar with both, but even without being steeped in that knowledge, it still was an incredibly rewarding work. Um, it offers a lot of um, characters. It offers a lot of different, different genres almost packed into one. There is definitely something for everybody, but at the same time, those somethings are so extremely different that there's going to be parts that, if you're not committed to being along for the ride, you might get thrown off by certain aspects of it. It's something where, for me, I almost, to avoid getting into spoilers, I had to almost pivot in my mindset part of the way through, the mindset with which I was approaching the media. But that didn't cause me to lose any of it. It didn't lose me because of that. It really separates itself into two different parts, and it's rewarding even if you have completely different mindsets when approaching both of those parts. I thought that I also had similar doubts around the midpoint of, like, how can this keep going? How can this keep its momentum going? And the answer is, it doesn't keep the same momentum going. It twists around and it changes its direction and it builds momentum in a different direction. And I know people, at least one person, who got thrown off by that change in direction and so didn't enjoy the second half as much as the first. But there's also people who didn't enjoy the first half as much as the second because of how different they are. For me, I think I got a lot out of both. I feel like the mindsets that I had during reading really rewarded me for both halves of it. And yeah, I don't know. It's a really interesting combination of lots of memorable characters, lots of really interesting themes, and lots of good logic puzzles to think about too, which is initially what I was looking forward to solving. But as it goes on, it starts to focus more on the themes, and I was able to get into that and just appreciate it as something I was reading, rather than something that I was actively trying to solve and tear away the layers. And I think that change in mindset reflects what the novel is sort of trying to get at and trying to tell you. And in that sense, has sort of probably had the exact experience that the author intended, for the vast majority of it, at least.
I do believe that personally, a big hallmark of my favorite narratives from a story writing perspective is where at some point with meaningful enough time before the end to reflect on it, the goals or the approaches to the goals change drastically, whether it's in an interactive
You
medium
you
or
you
not.
have to finish Malazan.
Okay, I will.
You're gonna love what happens.
I okay, not to make this a Malazan discussion, but it is interesting for me to see where we go from the sort of initial goals of let's spoilers, let's kill the Zine, fuck her, and see what happens after that. I'm interested to see where that all goes. But yeah, I believe that would be enough of the non-spoiler discussion, and I hope that anyone who might be interested in this will switch off now and read the whole thing, which is, it's not short. It took me
It's a
160
casual
hours,
100 hours, you know.
unless you're me who reads slower and goes with 160 hours. But,
You know,
it
just
depends on the
speed read it,
person.
and what? One day is 24 hours. That means you could read all of Umineko in like 4.5 days. It's not that hard.
It's not that hard, yeah. I
Just don't
beat
sleep for half a week and drink some coffee, have some Red
that'll
Bull.
put you in the right mindset.
Oh, definitely.
Right. Okay. Spoilers begin now. So I was thinking we should go now, kind of episode to episode, like our general thoughts about how we were reading, because I feel like a big thing about Umineko is like the sort of progression of the story, but also like the sort of meta narrative. In this case, what I mean, like the reader's thoughts as they read it, because the understanding of this narrative for, I believe, everyone does change as they read it, unless they really don't pay attention and they somehow have the same idea of what's going on during episode 2 as they have during episode 8, which is rare, but I have seen it. Indeed, episode 1 I think is great. Obviously, we have the slice of life battler Booba funny in the beginning, which at times grated on me. Now I look at it kind of with endearment, because it's kind of funny how like important some of that is in hindsight. But in the beginning, I was kind of like, oh my god, just shut the fuck up. And I was like, oh, finally the adults are talking, because I really enjoyed the established story and backstory of the Ushinomiya family, especially because my own sort of how would I describe it? My god relatives, so to say, have a very similar sort of this lineage of an industrial, wealthy family sort of thing. So it was very interesting for me to kind of see a Japanese perspective on that sort of thing. And I read through I went to some like historical documents from the 50s about like Japanese kind of trade relations, and it did indeed seem very plausible that around that time industry, and especially the mining industry, was booming because of the reparations and market towards the Americans in the Korean War. Not that that really matters in the end, but I thought it was I was already impressed in the beginning by how sort of down to earth but still interesting it was beginning. And obviously, you have to lay out that everyone has a motive for murder and all that sort of jazz. That's kind of just what you do in a murder mystery. But I feel like the first episode is really good because it shows a lot of restraint. It really does not reveal its cards, not almost at all until like the beginning of until the tea party rather, of what really the story structure is going to be. And I think that's really great, because it really kind of sets up from the start that this author has the whole thing planned out, at least on a structural level. It felt like a very calculated sort of effort of setting up the scene without like moving the story too far forward. Like there's no magic really, like no literal magic. Of course, there's implications of it, but you don't get the meta layers. You don't get anything like that. You just see the story as it is told from the characters, from the game board's perspective, right? Even though it is not the literal events, it is still only one game board, but you don't know that at the time and all that sort of jazz. I just like the atmosphere a lot too, like the way it's set up as this almost like sort of horror thing. That we got the Maria jump scare. That got me because I was like, you remember the CG with like the fish eyelids Maria, and then she
Yes,
turns
I
into
remember that.
Jeff the Killer.
Jeff the Killer.
It was funny because I took a screenshot to the spoiler chat, and I'm like, is that like a silhouette of Beatrice in her eyes? And I'm like looking like really deep in there, and then I press forward, and like at like nighttime, my whole apartment is dark, and I like look deep into her eyes, like to look at the silhouette in there, and I press forward, and it's Jeff the fucking Killer, and I'm like, oh, holy shit. That was really funny. It doesn't really go too far into like the horror aspects later on, except maybe like the gore stuff, but I don't really like that. But I just love the atmosphere it sets up.
Mm-hmm. So episode 1, I went in and I wouldn't say, I don't know if I would say I was hooked from the start, but I certainly was committed from the start. A lot of people they start Umineko and they might struggle, I think, or just be turned off by, it's sort of got a long-winded opening. It takes its time to introduce all the characters, to set up the plot, and in hindsight, most of that is necessary because everything else, every subsequent chapter moves past that part quicker, and it expects you already understand all the characters, you understand the premise, even if they certainly take their time arguing over the gold in pretty much every single chapter. And it's pretty funny. We certainly have some things that get rehashed, but no, overall, I think the intro makes perfect sense in setting everything up for the murder mystery. At that point, I was very just engaged in like, okay, I'm trying to read into everything, trying to figure out who the murderer would be, trying to I was approaching it as a murder mystery and approaching it as something that I was trying to solve as it was happening. I had no knowledge of what was going to happen in the subsequent chapters. I think I completely thought that each chapter, that each episode was going to be like one of the Twilights or something like that. Like I thought it was going to be one long, drawn out murder mystery for the entire length of the VN. So
in a way it is, but
but I mean, like, I thought, I didn't, at this point, I didn't know the concept of game boards. I thought this is reality. This is, okay, maybe we've got some unreliable narration here for some of the characters' perspectives, but I thought, okay, it's taken its time to set this up. The pace that it starts off at, I thought, okay, we're just going to reach like the first couple of murders at the end of episode 1, and then episode 2 is going to be the next murder, and then episode 3 is going to be the next murder.
Right.
And so when things started to speed up, because I at least thought that each murder was going to be a full day. Like I thought the Twilights were going to be literal. They were going to be trapped on the island for like a week, and every night someone else was going to die.
I thought the same too at the beginning.
So that illusion was very quickly dispelled.
Very quickly.
The murders just started coming, and they kept coming.
And it starts with 6 guys. 6 people.
Oh, yeah. Well, I knew it was going to start with 6 people, but I just didn't realize that, less than a day later, we've got the next 2, then the next,
I thought they would be
spaced
out. But
yeah, so it just really moved fast. And by the end of the chapter, I was like, what just happened? How did they just wipe out the entire family, basically, and then have Beatrice show up, and then what happens? I was
this is like before the tea parties.
I was so confused, and I was like, where does it even go from here? And even after the tea parties, I was like, I was like, okay, I see. So there's Beatrice, there's whatever. I knew Beatrice was gonna show up because everyone has seen the Beatrice sprites,
Of course.
but I was like, okay, what context does she show up in? And she's not real, she's fake because everyone's clearly there's only 18 people there. There's not secretly another person. So I was like, what's going on? And then chapter 2 starts, and I'm like, wait, this is a flashback. And then I'm like, wait, we're just seeing the same events again? Are we seeing them from a different perspective? And it wasn't until I think midway through, or I don't even know if it was until the first murders of episode 2 that I realized it was telling a completely different version of events.
I think it was like Beatrice showing up in the flesh when I was like, okay, because I think it was around. For me, it was like during the murders of the first episode when I started to suspect that there would be a time loop thing that would happen, because I thought these characters, I've seen too much people something about like, I don't think these characters would have this following they have unless they had more screen time, and in that case, you kind of have to resurrect them somehow. So I thought I was starting to think.
That's the thing. I didn't even know any of these characters like the main family characters. I didn't know any of them had a following. Basically, the only characters that I was familiar with were Battler and Beatrice, and then obviously a couple other characters that show up down the line, like Erica. Right. I didn't, I was like Natsuhi, Kraus, George, Jessica, all these people. I have no idea who they are. I've never seen these before. The only people I'd seen out of the Ushiromiya family were like Rosa and Maria. And that's just because someone played them in an objective game.
True. I had seen enough memes to kind of have. I mean, not everyone. Like, I didn't know cows and stuff like that. And but I had the hunch. I think for me, it's interesting because for me, like around the beginning of episode 2, when I realized this is different, I was like, I'm disappointed because I thought we would be solving the real events, which are obviously, which is at this point what we would see as the first episode, because that's the original sort of like sequence of events. And I thought like, okay, well, the reader feels more strongly about that being like what really happened. Obviously, the story moves on quite far from that concept of what really happened being like, it works, or rather it develops on that quite a lot. But yeah, I had sort of similar thoughts during like the start of episode 2, which was like, what's really like, why are we doing a time loop if it's different? What's the point of this? Like what's the narrative purpose of doing a different sequence of events?
Yeah.
Like,
I also was like, at the time, I was very much trying to figure out, okay, which version is actually real. I was like, the first one's what really happened, and this is just him being shown an alternate version of events of what could have happened.
Right.
And trying to solve the mystery based on that. And I thought, okay, but the first one is still real because there was no metaverse at the time. There was no There was no watching the game board. So for a very long time, I was convinced that chapter 1 was what was the real deal.
Yeah, I thought. I think that's I think that's an intentional, to a degree. I feel like that's intentional because it's just like a result of the way that it's told in general. Going back to the ending of the first episode, though, I just want to say that I think like the end is absolutely fantastic. Like it spearheads so quickly towards the climax of like the Natsuhi running off from the room, them reading the letter. She's dead now. What the fuck happened? What, Beatrice? What? And then they all die, and then you have the letter written by quote unquote Maria, like, please solve our murder. This shit fucked up, bro. Mm-hmm. I just think that's a very wonderful, like, for me that was the point when I was like, okay, I feel like this shit is gonna be good. And I'm kind of invested in solving this now. Like it was that like the ending really. I think in general, just like the mood and tone of episode 1 is really unique because you don't have the meta layers. But like, I think it's definitely like it has some of the highlights in like the sort of like atmospheric like tone of the question arcs. And so moving on to episode 2 and 3, which I feel like we can kind of group to save time, because I feel
Yeah.
like they like episode 4 is kind of its own thing, but 2 and 3 kind of develop in the similar way. To me, that was kind of the slump of the series, if there would be one, or at least I would rate those as my lowest in reading them at the time. I feel like on a reread there would be a lot more to dig into, but I feel like at the time, especially episode 2, it was kind of like I was a little like unsure of whether or not this structure will pay off, because after episode 1, we just talked about like the sort of like, so but that was real, right? And then this is not. So why are we doing this? This is kind of weird. Wait, goats? Okay, I'm on board now. Wait, anime girls? I'm not on board anymore. But I do think that the sort of, it is valuable to the whole experience to have that state of like confusion and not being sure of where this is going to lead, because then as that progresses into more clarity, it is also an interesting progression on a reader level, I think.
Well, so episodes 2 and 3, I didn't find to be a slump, but mainly because at that point, that was sort of the peak of when I was most engaged in solving the mystery, and every single murder was like a brand new, exciting data point for me to try and figure out who could be the killer based on that. And at the time, I was very convinced it was Rosa. Well, I
Of course,
wasn't, but
Rosa Terice.
I wasn't convinced of it, but it just seemed the most logical. Now, in hindsight, I was partially right because
I don't think it's an like I think it's a very fine assumption at the time to make. Like,
yeah,
it's not
and in
unfounded.
hindsight, I mean, I knew she was suspicious because of the way she was acting, and well, I was right. She was an accomplice in chapter 2, so I was not entirely wrong. But I think at the time, I just was not willing to consider the idea of accomplices. Aside from
Right.
like, by the end of chapter 3, I was convinced Genji was an accomplice. But the rest, I just didn't think that they would be so low. Not that Genji is low; he's doing it out of his duty. But the others, I thought, why would they participate in this? Why would they, you know, I even if they were, now I wasn't willing to think about it enough to realize why it works, right? Once I realized it later on through some nudging and help from people, I was like, oh, I guess because they didn't realize or know that it was actually going to be murders, or if they did, they thought, well, my life's in danger, so I have to help them anyway, and I have to do this for the money.
Right.
So
It's interesting because like I definitely, so I had less people like, I'm not to say I do think you were in general a much more observant person while reading it, because I think you just went in on with a much stronger mindset. Because for me, I didn't have like a preconception this would be something for me to solve. Like, especially like during the first Twilight, I was mostly reading it as like, well, I mean, I guess like, because I had read some Agatha Christie before. Like, of course, I've read like And Then There Were None, so I understood the concept of like trying to solve it before it's revealed in the story. But I guess I didn't have the mindset of like this is like the thing of this narrative, right?
yeah.
So like during episode 2 and 3, I was a little wishy washy, I guess. Like I was, when they were actively pointing to solve something, like like you have like Battler and Beatrice like discussing something, having a logic battle by themselves, or not by themselves, but like one-on-one, sort of that sort of thing, where it's like they are actively having that debate. At those points, I was definitely into it, and I was trying to figure it out before Battler. But on a larger scale, I wasn't yet thinking too much about like who the overarching mastermind is, because I didn't really know if there even was one. Because I feel like a lot more sort of in the dark about like what the structure of this mystery even is. Is it like a different culprit each time, or is it the same one? Because that stuff only really came up towards like the end of episode 4, I think, when I started
Yeah.
to kind of have that.
So I wasn't sure about that either, and by episode 2 I didn't really have anyone helping me or nudging me, but I just assumed for the sake of my own sanity that there was a mastermind, and that it was the same person each time. Because if it wasn't, then it was going to be a lot harder to figure out who it was.
And also, it would be a lamer narrative. I should have trusted the writer more, but at that point, it's a little hard because you don't really know where it's going to go.
Well, to be fair, episode 3 does turn that on its head because it does introduce another culprit. However, it signals that very, very strongly. It makes it almost painfully obvious that there is another culprit.
Right. But,
even though it still misdirects you. Every single time you think it's making it obvious, it misdirects you. So for me, as someone who is very not liking to lock in my opinions or my guesses, I was like, wait, so they're showing Eva doing all these killings, but the real Eva is really sad about it and not wanting to be killing them. So does that mean that it's not actually her? So that was what threw me for a loop and prevented me from outright saying it's totally her. I think a lot of the metaphors or the allegories or the analogs that were presented via the magic scenes, I didn't know what mattered and what didn't. Right? I didn't know what could be used as this is an allegory for something that really happened or something that I can really think this character did.
Because really everything it kind of matters, but just on different levels.
Yeah, like, it's hard to tell. Okay, so Ronove appears now, and he's an analog of Genji, but is he really an analog of Genji?
Yeah,
because now you've got all these steak anime girls, and it's like, okay, well, sure they represent the stakes, but now what do the Chiesters represent? Like, if everything represents something,
aren't they just the guns? Like literally just the guns?
Well,
because like the Chiester, Winchester, Chiester.
The Chiesters are used to kill Kraus and Natsuhi, but Kraus and Natsuhi are not killed with guns.
Oh yeah, that
so
is
they
confusing.
Don't represent a consistent murder weapon.
Yeah, I feel like.
And the Chiesters are killed. So here's the thing: the Chiesters are used to kill.
They're
Hideyoshi,
like the most
Rudolph, and Kyrie, but in reality, those three were killed with guns. They fought each other and then were finished off by the real killer, not Eva, the real killer. Whereas Kraus and Natsuhi were given were given sleeping pills by Eva and then strangled to death. They were not shot with guns at all. Completely different methods of murder. Yet the Chiesters were used in the magic realm for all of them, which therefore breaks down the notion that everything in the magic world has to represent something. Now, and to be fair, the goats at that time also didn't represent anything consistent, because in Chapter 2, they're used to represent just different methods of murder for killing, say, George and Goda. But then they're also used to represent the explosion at the end when they're chasing Rose. The goats are really used as a multi-purpose.
They're just there to be hot for me, I think.
They're just there to be goated.
Yeah. I think you're a lot further in like finding these kind of practical analogies.
Well, I was trying to, but the problem was there was no real way to make it perfectly slot in.
Yeah, because for me,
guessing myself left and right.
Because for me, I definitely obviously from the very beginning, I'm not that stupid. I of course understood that this is an unreliable narrator. It's a magic representation of a real murder that happened without magic, right? But for me, I definitely always thought more about the sort of thematic representations of the magic stuff, which is I think why for me episode 2 and 3 might not have felt as satisfying, because it definitely at that point it still kind of mostly just dealt with the murders, right? And it was only really in episode 4 when we started to get more sort of like character, philosophical, social thematics as well, which was when I started to be like, okay, this is actually interesting now. So that's why I think like episode 1 and episode 4 are definitely my high points in the question arcs for different reasons. Like episode 1 is because I thought it was just like a great opening, intriguing, and episode 4 because that's when it really like the story really started get those like themes in, like those juicy themes of what magic is, what is fantasy, why people are the way they are. You know, we got Maria, we got Angie, and I really like episode 4. I think for a lot of people that is the slump, because the midpoint of like episode 4, when you just kind of have like not much happening in the game board because they're just kind of chilling, and or in a prison or something, you know, I don't know, in a cage, and no one's really dying, and then you just have like NG having the most miserable life of all time, and but I thought like that stuff was really, I really loved that stuff, because that's when I think the story really starts to show more of its like thematic development that then really starts to take more of a focal point in the answer arcs, I think.
I mean, in hindsight, yeah, like it makes perfect sense what it's meant to communicate thematically, and that's placed there where it is. The way it's told is certainly not easy to read, because you know you care about getting back to Rook and Jima, and all of a sudden you're watching these scenes that probably don't need to be as long as they do.
Maria
I do agree. And
Sakutaro
and Anj. It's like, okay, you could have probably communicated the same themes in less words, but that's, you know, I understand the purpose of it and why it's there.
I found it very earnest and like coming from a personal place, which is why I liked it. Mm. Like he definitely like me, yeah, okay, it is long-winded, but I appreciate it, like that he like knowing that I was told that he worked in Child Protective Services or some kind of like a social or like a public position with children, which I thought like made a lot of sense, that he would want to show more of this like Maria's like domestic side and stuff like that.
Oh, I didn't know that. That makes sense, because it's very much like, well, the whole concept of it is very poignant. Like it's her dealing with this life that really is tough, and she's neglected and she's abused, and yet she's inventing this world in her head to try and make a better light of it. And you are left with the question of, do you agree with Anj that it's delusional, or are you going to support what she's doing because it's making her own life better and using the only tools she has available, which is her imagination? And obviously the way Anj is portrayed in that chapter makes it clear you're supposed to sympathize more with Maria and understand why she's doing it, because Anj is kind of portrayed as a bit petulant and a bit.
Personally, I thought it was fairly balanced, but I can see.
It is. But like there are times when she gets most critical of Maria, that she's being just very unfair to her and kind of rude. The rest of the time, you're meant to sympathize with Anj, because this is really your first full introduction to her and her life and what she has had to deal with. So you sympathize with both of them, and I think at the time I also said, and I even later on, this comes back later, you know, even though you're clearly meant to disagree with her, she's not portrayed as a complete straw man. You can understand why she feels the way she feels, especially given her life situation, her youth, and the stuff she says in another narrative would be the protagonist's words of, you know, what this message is meant to be in some cases, but in this case it's not.
Yeah. So episode 4 kind of is used as a wrap up for the question arcs, and I think in many ways it does kind of feel like the culmination of like the sort of murder mystery aspects, because while episode 5 and to a degree 6, but not really, while episode 5 still has like an actively solvable set of crimes, I feel like the approach to that becomes drastically different because because at that point you're not like you're not really meant to root as much for the sort of physical solving of the crimes. Like, for example, like, you know that Kinzo is dead by that point, but you still want to, but you don't, but it becomes more of a character thing. You don't want to defile Natsuhi and, you know, that sort of stuff. So you go along with it. So I think episode 4 really is, especially the end, even though it's kind of fucking stupid and Battler is dumb as shit, but it's in a funny way, but it still like is used as this sort of capstone. And I do think it works pretty well as that.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, even at the time, when I was reading the end of episode 4, I was like, okay, if this thing that he did was foreshadowed, it's certainly so well hidden that he probably isn't going to be able to remember it. I believe him when he says he doesn't remember it. And even at the time, if it had been me on my own, which it was at the time, I hadn't really tried to solve anything with anyone's help yet, you know, I don't think I would have been able to go back to that line in episode 3 and pinpoint, oh, that's his sin that led to the murders. That would have been such a stretch. I'm like, no, that's so... Because I would have been like, come on, you're not going to kill people over that.
Yeah.
So, you know, until you know the wider context behind it. And when I did... Right, I was like, okay, what promise did Battler break? I assumed he broke a promise. I didn't know what. It wasn't until, and I'll get into this later more, but it wasn't until the end of chapter 5 when I was like, oh wait, so it was the line about Dante and Beatrice waiting for him at the top of the whatever mountain in Dante's Divine Comedy. It was like waiting for him. Wait a sec. Wasn't there a scene where someone said they were waiting for him? So I vaguely remembered it. Yeah. And then I went back and I confirmed it, and I was like, okay, so that's the sin. So I did figure it out on my own, even though at that point I kind of already knew who the killer was.
Right. For me, no fucking shock, because I was taking so many breaks during question arcs that and like a 2-month break before I even started episode 5 after episode 4. So no fucking shot that I could have remembered that. I do think like it is in a way a bit of a shame, because I feel like a big thing about like Umineko and what makes it unique is that Yukisha really does approach it from a perspective of like, you need to understand the motive and the heart to really understand who the killer could be. And I do think there's enough, if you really go with that mindset, I feel like there is, and then you do like, so you do come to the conclusion early on enough that Kanon and Shannon are the same person. At that point, like, I feel like there is enough material to kind of understand that, okay, something about clearly shit is going on with like their partners and the engagement to George, and then stuff like that, kind of throwing everything like into a sort of flux where you can kind of see the seeds for what the motive could be and why love is so important to it. But I do think like the sin is something that I don't think is realistically like understandable at the end of episode 4. Like, if you remember,
the only way it is if you're like, say when it came out. When it was coming out and you only had the 4 chapters, you didn't have the option of continuing on to read more, and then you're going back and poring over everything, trying to pick up on any hints to what Battler could have done wrong. I feel like that would be the only one that's like, okay, this is something where he clearly made a promise that he forgot about, and the person seems like they could have been more affected by it than they let on.
Yeah, because for me, like going through episode 5, I still wasn't like thinking about it, I guess, that actively. It was only during episode 6 when they started focusing on kind of obviously on like Kanon and Shannon and Beatrice. It was around that time when I was like, oh wait, they're all the same person, aren't they? Around when they, I think it was for me that when it clicked was when they said like a metaphor of like when can someone not love. Oh, for example, if they're married, you can't love someone else or whatever. And it's like, wait, I get it now. It's
Mm-hmm.
like two personalities. But like for throughout episode 5, I wasn't that active about thinking it, probably because it had been such a long break between episode 4 and episode 5.
Yeah.
So I was more along for the ride, and I still think that episode 5 is like I still it was still absolutely fantastic. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
episode 5 is definitely it has many high points,
Yeah.
especially the
Well.
scene in Kinzo's study where you have so many like players coming together in different motives, like on the game board and on the meta layer. Like and it's kind of a chaotic, like oh this is Kinzo is dead, but no we can't say he's dead. Oh, but Natsu is being blamed. Oh, how could this have happened? And then Battler is there and jumps through the window and everything. I really love that scene because it takes some of the structures of question arcs, but like makes it a lot more. It just adds more layers to it, I guess, adds more
Mm-hmm.
motivations behind it, and like changes the way you look at it because you're no longer trying to solve something. You're trying to you're kind of turning almost to a different side where you're trying to explain something with bullshit,
Yeah.
but still make it believable, and that was really fun.
Yeah. Well, and then that's Battler's strong suit is coming up with complete BS explanation.
Indeed,
He really
I
got
just
to flex his muscles there. But no, there's two things I want to say. One is that since we're closing off our discussion a bit of question arcs,
right.
is that I really feel like that's the heyday. Even if it's not maybe the like you can argue over what the best chapters are, but those episodes 2 to 4 are clearly meant to be in hindsight viewed as the heyday of the game. At
Yeah.
least the point at which it is a game, because episodes 5 and 6 really hammer in sort of a nostalgia for Battler just going in logic battles with Beatrice. His loss of being able to engage with her in the same way really makes you feel what he feels, which is, man, I miss like having her actually around and being like arguing over the murders and doing all that, because really those logic battles don't really happen anymore after
Not
you
really,
have
no.
some, but they're more between Battler and Erica. The Battler Beatrice ones had their own flair, and you really don't get any of those anymore after question arcs. So it makes you nostalgic for that, and I think it does a great job of making you feel like those were like the archetypal chapters of the story, and then it all sort of begins to break down and come to a different direction afterwards. Um, and then what I also want to say is chapter 5, to start talking about episode 5, the thing that I think, regardless of the actual content of what happens, which I think is still great. The thing that I think episode 5 does amazingly well is guiding you as the reader to pivot in your mindset. If you, like me, were more geared towards solving the mystery and thinking through everything logically and trying to understand everything that happens underneath the magic and the illusions, and guiding you towards the mindset that you are going to need to have for the answer arcs, which is a more thematic one of, you know, protecting the integrity of the people who these illusions can protect and understanding why these illusions are created. Episode 5 is basically it's basically indicated that it's going to be where you try to start understanding Beatrice's mindset, and it really teaches you, about why would you would use these illusions, and why you don't necessarily want to be ruthlessly, relentlessly trying to uncover every aspect of the truth to expose it to broad daylight. And it sort of brings you over to the witch's side as you fight against the human side. And it really gives you a wider perspective, and it's the perspective you need to see out the rest of the story and actually enjoy it.
Indeed. That was a lot. Because for me, like during the question arcs, I still kind of had this sort of like mindset of like magic isn't real. But we can't get them all out of this time loop, right? Right? Like it's still a time loop, right? Like it's still like they're still in Beatrice's magic clutches, you know. Like if Balor just solves it and denies the witches, they'll all be fine, right?
Yeah, that's what well, so I thought to an extent. I was like, there's no magic, this is all fake. I just thought all the magic was a representation of something. So that if Balor can solve this, then they can. I didn't think it was an actual time loop. I thought it was a metaphor for him basically being at the end of the line, having everyone being killed, and having to figure out what happened or why it happened or who did it.
It's
so that
actually
he can
a metaphor.
escape the island and get home.
It's actually a metaphor.
Made me think, oh, he's got to solve this so that he can get home.
Right, kinda. I just think it's funny. It's a metaphor for them all being on the dinner table, and Battler is just going through an insane like progression of different scenarios of how they could all die, and then it ends with, "Oh shit!" and he shoots Shannon in the face. Don't worry, guys, you're all safe now. And that's the whole story, and that's everything happened in his head during like dinner when he was just spacing out.
That's Umineko.
But yeah, I'm sure we'll get to that idea towards the ending, of course, regarding Battler. For me, it was around episode 5 when I was like, so they are actually all dead, right? And this is all metaphor. Damn, that shit sucks. And episode 6 as well. I was like, okay, so none of them are alive. Not Battler either. But it still left a little bit of like, so what is this meta-word Battler a representation of? Which, of course, again, that comes up like way at the end, you know. But indeed, so yeah, as you said, episode 5 really kind of works as a transition towards like because it has like a lot of the elements of episode of the question arc, sort of mystery solving, but like it turns your perspective towards kind of like the magic side of the discussion. And then of course episode 6 goes kind of then goes fully into like, okay, Battler is the game master now, and this is all about like understanding what Beatrice is, who she is, and what a bitch Erika is. God, I fucking hate Erika so fucking much. She's a fun character to hate, but my God, she's insufferable because she's like, because I mean, there's insufferable characters, right? And then there are insufferable characters who are like thematically made to be like unempathetic, uncharitable, going against everything you value in the story, and it's like, God, this bitch, you know. But she's a good addition. So then episode 6 rolls around, right? And at this point we've got like Battler's got a cool fit. Beatrice is in a coma or something, you know. It's like, what the hell is going on? And I really like at the start I was like, this is weird. I don't like the dynamic we got going on with like the chick Beatrice as she is called, I think. But towards when it starts to get going, I was like, okay, this is actually really valuable because it gives a lot of context for like why, you know, what's going on, what created Beatrice, you know, what are the rules that set her forward, you know, because it is interesting to go from the perspective of like, what do you need to create the Beatrice that we know, like kind of like Full Metal Alchemist, like they're trying to bring back their dead mother, you know, like what are the elements that we need, you know, and it's not like sulfur or, you know, calcium, but it's more like you need the legend, you need the motive, you need the myth of Ginzo's mistress, who it turns out she was really, you know, and all that sort of stuff. And I thought it was all very interestingly done. And I thought episode 6, while in some ways didn't have quite the same like chaotic energy in a good way as episode 5 had, I thought like it still had like especially with like NG coming back, stuff like that. It was a very interesting because that's when it fully went into like, okay, we're thematic now. You know, like don't, the murder stuff doesn't really matter. They're all sleeping. Oh wait, Erika killed them. That was really fucking funny. I was like, I thought it was really fucking funny when she was like, you do realize that I'm not the detective right now, and I'm like, wait, why did she wait? Oh shit. Did she do that so she could fucking shank them? and she did. And I'm like, oh my god, this bitch.
Yeah, I didn't find that funny. I was just really mad. I don't know. When I get emotionally invested enough in a story, I really, really get affected by the bad things that happen in it. And characters that are just like that, especially when they like get their day in the sun and they get to win for a little while, and when they're like a bully, and when they're just emotionally like detached and they basically are just completely terrible and evil and they win. On, talking about this from a detached perspective, it seems like, okay, it's just annoying, right? But
yeah,
when I'm in the moment, it's way, way, way more magnified. Like, it's so painful and like just like boils my blood to read stuff like that. And yeah, I just really, in episode 6, like I borderline almost crossed over to like, oh, we love to hate Erika. She's such a bitch, but she's classic. Episode 6, I borderline went over. I almost crossed over into, no, this is just a bad character and I hate her and I just want her gone. So now I don't know how I feel now.
Yeah,
I don't know how I feel now. Like I think I think
she's
like she gets a bit better at the end. Like in episode 8, she's a bit more like, oh, there's the classic
more fun.
Erika.
It's more fun again.
She's fun in episode 8. In episode 6, like, she's just like,
I think she's the same. I think she's the same character in all of them, but like the power and the actions that she has the chance to take in episode 6 just make her like, oh wait, she's just fucking terrible, you know? Like, I think episode 5 Erika and episode 8 Erika, like, they're the same character very much, and they would still have done the same thing, but they just, like, the story just didn't have her do that.
Yeah, the story doesn't give it her as much as it does in episode 6.
Yeah, and like just like taunting Battler like with everything. It was like, but it does make the ending. It does make the ending pretty satisfying when Beatrice comes back.
I will admit, I think, I don't know if you remember this. I fast forwarded through part of the scene where she's just taunting him and like torturing him. Like, I'm like, I don't want to read this. I gain nothing from reading this. I'm already enough mad at her that I'm gonna be satisfied when they kill her or defeat her. I don't need to see any more. So I just fast forwarded.
Yeah, you know what? That's fair enough. But then Beatrice just shows up and they get their cool CG of
that ending of episode 6 is one of the coolest moments in the entire thing. Especially that final CG. Amazing.
Yeah. And then episode 7 rolls around, and it's probably the most unique of the whole thing, and I fucking love it. Episode 7 is really good.
Episode 7 was a big bounce back, for sure. Oh, Will is my boy.
I just love the fact that, like they finally get a character in who somehow, like, is competent enough to solve everything just like that, and then, like, you know, just like, poof, I got it. And what's his superpower? He has fucking empathy. He cares about people. He's a kind soul with friendly eyes, you know. It's so cool. It's like you got this. His design is so fucking funny too. It's like the quintessential like OC swordsman anime guy. And it's such a subversion of everything. And I love Leon as well. I think they're a really cool character. And just like you don't expect it, but for me they shot up to like top tier characters. I think.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
and just I think it's just like a very beautiful episode. Like the tone is wonderful. Like just like this quiet funeral, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
nothing's bad's really happening. You have these tones of like sinister, like why we're trapped here. What's Ben Costell's like deal? She's evil, so what's going on? You have this undertone of like something bad's happening, but
Mm-hmm.
it also like gives a lot of time to just kind of empathize with the characters and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And like everyone kind of gets their chance to spill their soul out in a way because that's Will's superpower. He gets everyone to just talk honestly. And I thought that was really wonderful. Like I loved every bit of dialogue, just all the characters, even the ones that I don't really like, especially Kinzo after what you find out. It's
Mm-hmm.
like but just like even before that, we got like Rosa talking about like her quote unquote killing Beatrice that we learned before, and like her kind of guilt over that, and we have like I just always remember when Will is talking to Jessica, and then he mentions like, "Oh yeah, I remember your school performance. I like the Turbetten, you know, the Petta Pata song." And then she's like, "No, shut the fuck up! Don't mention that."
Yeah.
That was good. Sadly, you had British Jessica for some reason in your
Oh yeah, well, because
patch.
I think I read like I didn't know anything about it, and it was one of the
Yeah,
options for the
yeah.
mod, and I thought, oh, I'll use the PS3 thing because all the PS3 stuff is better. So
Yeah. I didn't notice it. So for me, that came so out of fucking left
oh
field
my
because
goodness.
it has the Ryukishi, like the
Yeah,
original
the OG
CG,
Sprite, and it's just
and it had
random Toho costume.
yeah, and then like the comments, the Nico like comments scrolling
Oh
through at
yeah.
like 15 FPS.
You still get the comments in the British version, but
That's good. That's good.
yeah,
But like it just like
it's really entertaining.
I was just like reading, and then that shows up, and I'm like, I just like, my mind was just like, what, oh, but yeah, and I, so before that revelation in episode 7, I was like, so Kinzo, like someone else is the father, right? And it's someone we don't know because it probably doesn't matter, like it, because it can't be Kinzo. You know, I said that like just like thrown off. Okay, well, someone else has to be the father because you know Kinzo's daughter, and well, Jesus,
Well,
uh, that that
that's
was that.
partly why I don't fully regret having it quote unquote confirmed for me early because I never would have guessed. I wouldn't have been willing to.
Yeah,
It's not the
I
sort of thing I
didn't.
would accept until it's legitimately told to me because it's like I'm not going to think that about a character that they would do that. There's nothing else to indicate that they would do that aside from them being like generally crazy and unhinged.
Yeah,
It's
I guess it's just like because for you it came pretty early on, right? During like episode 4 or something.
no, it was so this was I think during like around end of like between episode 4 and episode 5 is most of
Yeah,
when I had these conversations with other people about trying to solve different aspects of the what had happened. And that was one thing where I was like, okay, well, like they were like, okay, so think about how Kinzo's talking to this 1967 Beatrice, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's hinted that um, she's his uh, daughter with the original Beatrice. Like that's kind of hinted at even in
yeah.
question arcs. But I'm like, and then they're like, well, is he how? What is he talking to her? Is he talking to her like a daughter? I'm like, well, no. I'm like, he's talking to her as if she's like the Beatrice, or no. Well, it was one or the other. I was like, um, he was talking to her either like
Like she has the soul of like the
yeah,
same.
like the way he was talking to her was like almost. Oh yeah. I think it was that she was. I was like, okay, well, this is like this is a Beatrice. This is like this is his mistress, but And they're like, well, is he talking to her like a mistress? And I'm like, no, he's talking to her like she's his daughter. And I'm like, well, and then it started to think, okay, so I know there was an OG Beatrice, and then I knew this was like the second Beatrice, but I was like, okay, either this is a second Beatrice and she's an orphan that he found and raised to be the replacement of the OG Beatrice and made her into his lover, or she's
which is still fucked up, by the way.
which is still, yeah, either way it's bad. But I'm like, he's not gonna like not his own daughter. I didn't think that, I wasn't willing to think that was really what happened. So then when I said it's not that, I'm like, there's no way, it can't be, please tell me it's not that. And they're like, well, you know what they say, I wouldn't put it past the old man.
Well, that basically confirms it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's why when I say I had it confirmed, I had it confirmed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that sucks. And that's the one thing that I don't really regret having confirmed, because like, it's so bad. It doesn't matter when you find that out. The only thing it actually affected in my solving the mystery was that I was like, okay, so that is the parent of the today Beatrice. I was like, okay, that confirms it, which means it can't be one of the adults, which I'd already pretty much I didn't want it to be one of the adults at that point, because I knew that they basically had some sort of relationship with Battler, and I'm like, doesn't make any sense if it's, you know, one of the other adults.
Of course.
The only adult that I still thought it could have been at that point was Kyrie, because I thought she might have been his birth mom, which she was, but not enough, you know, that wasn't a motive to kill him, to kill everyone. So at that point, I already suspected Cannon and Shannon the most. I just didn't realize that they were the same person yet. And I only suspected that because I was being really like pushed to think about, well, what is the significance of Cannon's disappearance? How can a body disappear like that? Given all the red truths you're told about the murder in chapter 2 specifically, how could Cannon have disappeared? And I was really stumped. And they were like, even think about it like, how if Cannon, imagine he was actually furniture. How would you make a table disappear? And I'm like, thinking about all these ways, and I'm like, well, that wouldn't work. And I'm like, oh, you could move it, you could throw it out. And they're like, no, like, someone would see it. Someone would X, Y, Z. I'm like, really stumped. And then it was like a day later, and I've been thinking about it, and I was like, well, what if it was always an illusion in the first place? And that clicked so well for me. I didn't even say, I said, please don't confirm this, but that's what I think. And I was like, that has to be it, because that just makes so much sense with the themes of Umineko. So this was early chapter 5, I think, when I figured this out. And I was like, that has to be it. And then chapter 5, first few scenes, you suddenly see them together when Battler's in the room. And I'm like, uh-oh, something must be different, or I'm wrong. But then Battler sees Kinzo, and I'm like, oh. Yeah, so, so that was sort of how I also figured out that Battler was an unreliable narrator in chapter 5. I mean, the Kinzo thing should probably hint that to you on its own anyway. So yeah, no, it's the only other so it was the Kinzo Beatrice thing that I had confirmed, then the mansion exploding that I had confirmed, and then the Canon Shannon thing that I was sort of pushed towards figuring out, which in all isn't that much. Like, the Kinzo thing I would have not figured out. I would have had to be told that. The mansion thing, I also don't think I would have figured out. They tell you that basically in one of the chapters. They say, "Oh, there's all these explosives under the mansion," and they show it in full detail in chapter whichever. Like, so yeah, I know it disappointed a bunch of people. I saw a few people were saying they were disappointed that I had help and that I'd sort of figure out so much stuff. Um, Especially the Canon Shannon thing. I don't think I would have. Chapter 5 doesn't really give you anything about that. I would have not figured that out till chapter 6 because that's the one that basically makes it obvious. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that I just didn't really consider. Right? Like I didn't think, because it flies so under the radar because there's so many scenes where those two are together that you just think, oh, there must have been a scene where Battler saw everyone together. Battler's been in so many scenes, they've been in so many scenes. So it's not something that really occurred to me that two people could be one. I mean, it did briefly occur to me, I remember, but I was like, no, there's no way. That'd be too hard to pull off. And then the other aspects of the mystery, I guess I'm getting derailed a bit and talking about the solving the mystery part, but yeah, it's something where I wish I'd been able to solve it on my own, and I wish I'd been able to, figure everything. But the problem is, there's a lot of stuff that I don't think I would have been able to figure out on my own anyway. I would have probably not figured it out until it's made really obvious in chapter 6 or chapter 7, and it's so it's really there really was no way to win, right? The only way to win would have been if I had somehow been able to put it all together on my own. But I either was going to need help or I was going to not figure it out until I'm told. So there's really, unfortunately, it is what it is.
I think it was just like, I think people were disappointed mainly just because like you were probably the smartest person in the spoiler server reading it, so it would people were more like very invested in like you figuring things out on your own because you were very observant during the sort of beginning of question arcs and stuff like that.
Unfortunately, I would have disappointed them anyway because I wouldn't.
That's not disappointing. No, I don't think it's disappointing. Like if you figure it out in like episode 6 or something. I mean, that's when I figure. I think that's
I would
when
have
most
disappointed
people figure it out.
myself if I.
Well, I guess, but I guess that's a difference in mindset. Because for me, I didn't really have any sort of like. The only thing was that I didn't want to lose to Clouder because she was reading it at the same time.
Well, Clouder wasn't even trying to solve it.
I know. I think what really pissed me off was how bad I did in episode 8 with the game.
Oh.
Because it was like one or two things that I misunderstood from the wording that made me stumped and while I did make a lot of like correct observations otherwise that would have put me on the right track.
That's sort of how I felt, not necessarily about one or two things about the wording, but that's how I felt a bit about question arcs and trying to solve the mystery based on that. Like, there's so much material you're given to sift through, and a lot of it just lends itself to overthinking. Like,
yeah.
There's so, like, the rules of the game allow for a lot of mischief, and it, based on just the logic games, which in question arcs is really all you're given to work with.
Yeah.
There's so many possibilities that are impossible to fully rule out. Like one of the things that like there were a lot of things that I was sort of given as ways to rule out people and ways to think about the mysteries that I thought, well, what basis would I actually have to make that assumption on my own without someone telling me I can trust that or not trust that? Like saying, oh, like I was given so much confusion over. Someone told me when someone's dead in the tip screen, in their face is red, that means they're really actually dead. And someone told me if if it says in red Goda is dead, that means he can't be running around stabbing people in the face. And I was like, so that means he physically can't be, even if he's dressed up as someone else and in another identity. So that's what I assumed. That for a while basically ruled out the. I for a while was thinking, oh, well, someone quote unquote died and then got back up and was pretending to be someone else, but just gave up the identity of being that person, so they died. And then when I was told that, I was like, oh, I guess that can't be true because they physically have to be dead. So
it was just an unfortunate way of like, because people kind of always they interpret those things differently, and I don't think that wording that you were told is in the story, but
yeah,
it did paint your interpretation a lot.
Yeah, I was so I was told a bunch of things by you guys mostly. Like I wasn't really talking to anyone else about what the people that helped me like later on, that wasn't really who I was talking about about the death meaning and stuff. So the death meaning and stuff was mainly different tips about what it means when Battler sees someone die, when someone dies in red, when someone dies on the tips screen, what it means when a red truth implies that someone died. I honestly feel like I was getting close because I was doubting the red truths about people dying, and I was thinking about what it could actually mean, and I was very, very close. Like I think when back around the end of episode, around the point when I actually thought it was Shannon, I came up with a whole theory of why it would be her, and I was explaining this to Trofflesby, and I think my explanation for how I didn't figure out the trick about the circular room murders because I didn't know, obviously, the secret of the identities needed in order to pull off the trick. But I did think that the red truth saying she died just meant that I thought, oh, so she let Shannon die, or whoever the killer was, let themselves, their identity die, and then just switch to being Beatrice the rest of the time. I thought that was it. And fundamentally, that is the trick to figuring out how to get around the red truths about death. But what people said to me after me theorizing that led me to believe that I was wrong and that I shouldn't go with that. And I think maybe people said that because I wasn't fully right about what happened. Maybe they said that to me because I wasn't fully figuring out the actual trick to those murders themselves, and or maybe I convinced myself I was wrong because I couldn't think about how the trick would actually work. But basically the point is I was really, really, really close.
Yeah.
I basically figured out all the different pieces aside from the identity.
Oh, certainly. Thing. Like you had already like that was why we were very impressed. It was because you had already pretty much like singled it down to Shannon and Kanon, and we were really excited for you to eventually make that connection. And that's why people were a bit like, oh, he got it confirmed to kind of other means. I feel like there was a contextual difference too, because like I might have like misunderstood the kind of like thought process. Because for me, like I would say that if someone is dead, then they can't keep walking around. More from the perspective of like you can't fake your death if the death is stated in red. But I didn't consider it from the perspective of the Shannon and Kanon thing, which I considered as a sort of different thing, but it would logically it would make that impossible. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. But I don't know if I regret my experience either way. Like I know you and other people who read it completely organically and only figured things out on your own said stuff along the lines that, you really enjoyed that experience and experiencing it at the rate at which the story reveals it. However, I also talked to several people that sort of helped me, who said that they had help and figured everything out before answer arcs even started, before even starting chapter 5. And they really thought that that was the optimal experience, that they were able to know everything going in to the last 4 arcs, and that they were able to pick up on all the subtle hints and foreshadowing and feel like all the hints about, nods and nudges about what the truth is, while not actually giving it away and making fun of the people that don't know. They were able to not feel like stupid, basically, based on that. However, maybe I have higher standards, because I think if I had fully gone through everything and figured everything out before chapter 5, I still would have felt stupid, because I would have felt like I didn't actually figure it out on my own. Like, what they were saying is like, you still figured it out. We just like gave you sort of the tools and the hints towards doing it. But to me, that cheapens it. I wish I could figure it out without any hints, but I don't
Yeah,
think I would have been able to. I don't know.
because I guess it's also like a difference in like what you seek from the story. Like, do you want to like win, or do you want to
Well,
have a good
that's the thing.
narrative?
The thing is, the time at which I figured it out was the perfect time to do so, because that was the point at which it started to switch away from figuring it out and towards the rest of the themes and the resolutions. So by the time I figured it out was the point where it didn't really matter anymore. After, if I'd figured it out later, I would have felt like it didn't matter anymore. But
I don't know. I very much enjoyed figuring it out in episode 6.
well, think about how heavily I was focused on trying to figure it out.
I know,
If
because I
I
wasn't
had
as
gone
much.
into episode 6 still focusing on that, it would have probably reduced my enjoyment of the themes, because I would have been still so focused on picking up on, what does this mean? What does this mean? How do I use this to figure out the truth? When that's not really what it's about at that point anymore. Figuring it out, if you haven't yet, is just a matter of course that you're going to do while reading it at that point. There is no
Right.
game anymore.
Yeah. I guess it's just a kind of like preconceptions and the sort of mindset you build
Yeah.
throughout the question arcs. For me, what the only thing that I regret was me being stupid with the Pepe Costello's game, because for me it was like I figured out, obviously, stuff like, okay, so the first murderer doesn't have to kill everyone in the room; they can still kill 2 people afterwards, and blah blah blah, and that sort of stuff. And oh, okay, so the narration is objective, okay. But it was just one thing that made me have to go through a couple of hints, because I kept misunderstanding. So it was when Shannon said that the kids confirmed their parents' deaths, but I understood that because Shannon said it, then like that is all of those implied confirmations have to be true, because the purple text is the only purple text that says that is from Shannon. So and I figured out, okay, Shannon is not a murderer, so that means that has to be true. So the kids, so at least the parents of the kids have to be dead in that, and that kind of threw me off. And then someone was like, well, you have to think about it as all the kids give their purple truth, and I'm like, but that's not what's in the text. And because I was so focused on like the literal context of the text, because it was, I mean, it is built to be a very semantic sort of like challenge. You have to like really dig into the what is said, how it's worded. So for me, that was like, oh, I I felt a little frustrated, because I felt like I had a reasonable. I felt like there were 2 different reasonable ways to interpret that, and whether it's the purple truth that is told is the only one that is like the conditional, based on if the person is a murderer or not, or it implies 3 other purple truths that follow their individual logic patterns.
Yeah.
And I fell towards the first camp, and that made me screw up the overall logic, because obviously the point is that Battler lied.
Yeah. I
But
think
because yeah,
it's very, yeah, like, and that was when I was talking to you. I think I was solving it in voice chat with you, and I was confused about that as well. And I was like, well, if everything hinges on what the meaning of this purple truth is, because either it means that all the kids confirmed it and that their word is gold, or it means that they can only be trusted in so much as they can be trusted. That she's basically delivering this on behalf of all four of them, and they can only be trusted at their own word. And I think in the end, I don't know whether it was because of our dynamic and nudging in the right way, and you sort of sharing a bit of what
I
you
feel like I
figured
probably
out.
just wanted to make you not have the same frustration, so I
Yeah.
probably nudged that towards
Yeah,
the.
but at that point though, I also was like, I feel like it's only possible to explain it if we assume that one of those kids could be lying.
I feel like that might be the case too. It's probably if I had like really gone through more of a rigorous process of elimination, I probably would have found a flaw with like an alternative way to say.
Like I was very rigorous. I manually wrote down every single purple truth on a piece of paper and who said it. And I went through and compared each one and who it ruled out and who it didn't. It was really fun because it it was a very nice, concise process of elimination game in a way that question arcs are not.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed that. Is there anything else we want to talk about? Do we want to talk about chapters 7 and 8 now?
I mean, we
Or did we already kind of talk about? We talked about chapter 7, and we sort of got
began
off
with
track.
chapter 7. Yeah, and I guess there's not like we talked about Will, we talked about Leon, we talked about. So for me, like the reveal with Ginza was the time in my experience where I was like, I don't know if I actually even like this. Why is this here? This just makes kind of everything feel worse now.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Like, oh, and that the combination of that and the fact that that Beatrice, that Shannon was was literally thrown off a cliff.
It's kind of just like, did that have to be like that?
Yeah, like it's such an ugly such an ugly underbelly to the story that I'm not sure if I like the fact that complements the themes of hiding things with like prettier illusions and stuff like that.
Because it's like, yeah, I see it, but I feel like there is already enough tragedy with like the story of Yasu, like as we see it. I feel like that's enough of the tragedy, because for me it was mostly just like Kinzo is like, you kind of see him as this like lovable crazy guy.
Yeah.
Like, okay, he's crazy, but come on, dude. He goes, "Whoa, Beatrice,"
Yeah, exactly. Come on, he's the Beatrice guy.
And you want to have that as like a basis for basically all of the characters for.
And what's
the themes
weird
of,
is that even after that reveal, he
they
goes back to that in chapter 8.
That's what frustrated me. I was like, okay, but they have because like I get it. You want to see the good in all people, but I feel like that's the only time when it's like unequivocally confirmed that someone is an actual piece of shit in the family. Everyone else, you can basically find some kind of like even for Rosa, you can at least like find like alternative explanations, and like because you deal with because because they tackle that, that they tackle how Maria sees it and stuff like that. But with Kinzo, there really is no justification. There is no alternative explanation. That he just did that to his own daughter, and it's like they don't really deal with that in a way that satisfied me, and that's the only thing that really still kind of sucks in my opinion, because I really like the way episode 8 does things, but it's just like, couldn't you have done that in a different way, in hindsight, it's like, yeah, because on like as a general thing, I really love the way that episode 7 is like the dark tragedy behind all of it, and then episode 8 is the optimistic like finale that moves past that. But it's like some things are just too heavy to put in so late and then like not have the time to tackle them.
Yeah. I don't know. I did really like the part in episode 7 with Claire. I enjoyed the
Yeah, it was
going
very
back
nice.
through the life and the story of this person. I don't really want to use the name Yasu because they
It
didn't
feels a
like
little.
being
It's a
called by that
yeah.
name.
It feels like a dead name, you know.
Yeah. Um,
I guess
but
just Beatrice in
sure.
general.
Um, but yeah, like it was really fascinating, and it was really sort of what I wanted, right? I wanted
Yeah.
that, I knew we were never gonna get like a scene of Shannon acting crazy or anything like that, even though we kind of
Yeah.
did. Like at the start when she is like really acting like a robot, how she's not gonna bring in Cannon so that Will can meet them.
Mm.
Um, but in terms of like actually being the killer and that back scene, going back and like seeing the slow descent, not into madness, but the descent of someone who slowly has these experiences over the course of their life that shape
Mm.
the killer. We ended up getting that, and I'm glad we did. I feel like that is in a story where you never actually explicitly say who the killer is. It's very, very hard to pull off, but also very, very important to have, because the
Yeah.
killer will never confess. You never get the killer being like, "Oh, it was me and this is why." In this case,
Yeah.
you get that, but it's indirect. There's a layer of
Yeah.
abstraction and of misdirection between it, and that is the best way to do it in a story like this, and it worked really well. I also think it really explained, that they were never Shannon.
Mm.
Shannon was a persona
Just
from the
one of them.
beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, that was what I also liked, is that like Beatrice was kind of the original, like the original persona is what developed into Beatrice the witch.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a way, all three of them are equally like real. So there's
Yeah.
no like one specific. Even though Shannon is kind of like easiest to see as like the main one, because like, but even then it's like it's just kind of the way it's written. But like
Yeah.
if you think about it, none of them are like the main one. I also really like the Golden Nocturne scene, with the
Oh, yeah.
it,
And that one, so I will say after episode 5, after I'd pretty much solved who the killer was, and you know, I did start going through, because it never ever, the Golden Nocturne is the closest you ever get to actually explaining all the tricks and how all the murders happened. So I did start going through the murders and theorizing and having things confirmed about how the murders actually took place once I knew who the killer was, and the tricks and the general ways that they pulled off the murders. So I'd
hmm,
figured them all out. I was actually kind of like I apparently solved the, once I knew the, like, which was a prerequisite to even going through this process, because I knew who the killer was and I knew that Shannon and Cannon were the same person. I apparently solved the circular closed room like as soon as we got to that point, like way faster than most people, which really shocked me, because I was like, once you know it, it's pretty obvious. But yeah, that's a really cool trick either way. And
hmm.
um, so having gone through every murder of the first 4 chapters and basically figured out what happened, um, it was really satisfying to go through and have Will, like, even then explain it in really abstract ways, but know what he means.
Yeah.
So that was satisfying. I think, because there's really no way you're gonna figure those out. That's something that I
Yeah.
don't regret going through and confirming as long as it was after I'd already solved everything else and that I was like certain, right? Like there was no more uncertainty when I was going and doing this. There was like, I know who it is, I know all this. Episode 6, confirms that there's only this many people on Rokenjima, and it just goes through and shows. So there was nothing more there was no more uncertainty. There was no reason to not go through and go through all the murders. So I did, and I'm glad I did.
Right. Let's move on now to sort of episode 8, and well, actually, I mean, the tea party of episode 7 is quite a lot. Maybe let's not go too in depth about that, because we do need to like get this going
Yeah.
sooner or later. But just shortly, I personally do not like to think that that's really what happened.
That's definitely. There's no way that's what happened. There's no way that's what happened, and I'll tell you why. Because
Yeah.
in episode 8, Anja reads the book of the real truth and says, it's mid.
I know, right? And I feel like what yeah, and then Battler's like that. Well, that wasn't so like that wasn't so crazy, was it? And she's like, yeah, because what I like to think is that the first of all is I don't think it feels really fitting to try to make any sort of like definitive explanation. I just think things went completely fucking wrong for Beatrice's plans. Didn't really work out somehow, and then shit happened, and then it exploded, and then
I
Battler
think
was
Beatrice
somehow
got cold feet and didn't go through with killing people, but something led to the thing exploding anyway. For all I know, here's how you could reconcile it. You could say that, Rudolph and Kyrie messed up and accidentally left they tried to pull some strat to get the money, but it involved toying with the exploding mechanism, and it ended up accidentally leading to the thing going off and killing everyone. So in that way, they did do it, but not because they're psychopaths who went through and individually murdered everyone. That's a possibility. But even then, I don't think it is something where someone's the culprit.
Yeah,
I don't think it's
think
something
so
where you
either.
could really say this is someone's fault, they murdered everyone. Because
Yeah.
otherwise, the reactions of Anja and Battler would have been completely different.
Yeah, and like just in general, like I think it doesn't really fit the themes.
Yeah,
that I like.
thematically, episode 8 seems to be clearly saying that nobody is the evil murderer who's to blame for these events.
Yeah, and I like that.
Yeah, I like that too.
I like episode 8 in general. Episode 8 is just so much fun. Like, some people are like, I don't care, too much magic, and I'm like, I don't give a shit. We just went through the whole tragedy. Let's get some fun shit in here.
Yeah, no, I really...
Big library, let's go.
Yeah,
Pirates,
I love
go.
episode 8. You know me, I'm a fantasy reader, so when you got to the point where you don't care about the mystery anymore, you've solved everything, give me some good fantasy. I love it. It's good.
And it was good. I liked it. I think it's good fantasy because everyone gets their chance to shine again in a big battle. And I just like the way the goats are like first they're like, oh, these fantasy guys aren't even real. They suck. And it's like, oh, what do we do? And then they say something dumb, and then Will's like, well, you just misunderstood the mystery completely. And it's like you can't win. You can't win unless you understand both completely.
Exactly.
And some people are like, oh, it's cruel to the readers. I'm like, mold, cope.
It's cruel to the readers that have been. It's cruel to readers that are intentionally misunderstanding the messages and refusing to accept them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and say what you will about that. I don't love it because it's a little bit.
It's on the nose.
It's a little bit on the nose, and it's a little bit like, I don't like. It reminds me of there's another game where it's borderline, and it's in the other game it's a little bit more borderline. Like, it's definitely not clear that it's actually insulting the fans of the game, but it's like, well, it evens out, because in the other one it's less clear that it's actually speaking about the fans, but if it is, it's basically insulting them for enjoying the game in the first place. So
Yeah.
whereas this, it's very clear that it's speaking about the fans, but it's only speaking about the ones that are enjoying it for the wrong reasons or are really not understanding it and aren't willing to open their minds to the, truth, basically, the real truth and the thematic truth.
Yeah, I think it's a little hard to say because we don't know the context of of the fan reactions in Japan. Because as far as I've understood, like based on
Oh, we
like reviews and
do.
stuff,
I've
like,
heard they hated episode 8.
and they just generally disliked answer arcs
Yeah.
throughout the whole thing. Of course, I can't generalize, but like they're based on like general review scores on like
Yeah.
VGMDB and stuff like that in Japan, or whatever the Japanese equivalent is. I've understood that on a general level, most people did not really enjoy answer arcs for the thematic shifts and stuff like that. So it does stand to reason that the author would have some choice words for them.
Yeah.
But
No, exactly. Like, I
it,
mean, for me, I don't think I would ever do it. Like, I think
probably
it's
not.
to me, it's a little bit in bad taste to call out your readers, even if you disagree with them and you think they're dumb. Um, they're still your readers, but
Yeah.
I think that in the world, you can justify it because it is a world where there are thousands of people that have created theories, and these people are in
Yeah,
direct
like at
opposition
least
to Anja because they've made her life worse, and they are the reason why she has had such negative memories and has her opinion of her family had been so warped and
yeah, it's not
under
like pulled
assault
out
by
of.
all these people obsessing over them and theorizing about them. So if you take away the meta aspect and you just think about the in-universe aspect,
It
it
still
hits a little
fits.
bit less hard, but it still works.
I think I think that the what makes it fun in my opinion, as to my reading, is that like even if it wasn't based, like it feels like it's a part of the world and it's been established and it feels fitting in the story.
Yeah.
And like even if you don't have, like even if the fans were completely always positive and it didn't have any connection to that meta aspect, it still functions perfectly well within the story.
Yeah,
And it doesn't
exactly. It's not like a
need that.
complete shoehorned in meta narrative just to completely baselessly call out the fans. It works in the narrative. It works in the diegesis.
It's relevant and it's established well before, you know.
Yeah. So I think it's fine. I think like everything in chapter 8, in episode 8, worked really well. And I think I just enjoyed reading the conclusion. And it was longer than I expected, but
Right.
I liked that you actually got to solve some real riddles, actually
Yeah.
input some answers. I enjoyed
Yeah.
that. So it was a combination of like you actually have to be smart, you actually have to think, but you also have to understand the themes if you don't want to be pissed off by it.
Yeah, yeah. Umineko fans when they see a sahe cake.
uh,
Have you had a sahe cake?
I don't
It's
know. I don't.
it's quite popular in Finland at least. I mean, it's a German thing, I think. It's basically a chocolate cake with like this sort of like orange jelly sort of like filling, like very
Okay.
fruity jelly kind of in between the layers. Very good, very good. One of my favorites. Very like sort of this dark chocolate covering. Very nice, very nice. But yeah, on to the ending. Towards the magic and trick stuff, and obviously the thematically, the not to say the correct ending, but the more arguably thematically relevant ending would of course be the magic ending.
Yeah.
And I quite like that Enji doesn't forget her family or the trauma, but uses it to fuel a creative career that makes people's
Yeah.
lives happier, and it's just very nice.
Like I said in the text chat, I think both endings are a valid way of dealing with that trauma and of moving forward, but it's clear that magic ending is a happier ending. It
Yeah.
is in the end, even though for some people that might not be the right choice, some people might not be able to, use that to strengthen them. They might have to reject it and forget about it. But in this specific case, in the story that we have been told with the character at hand, it is the most beautiful, thematic, and healthy choice for her to use that to fuel her and move on and treasure those memories instead of rejecting them.
Indeed. And then Battler and Tohia, and a lot of things are turned on their head. And you have had quite mixed feelings about this since you've read it, and I'm interested to hear if that has changed at all or stayed the same after the couple of weeks that you've had to ruminate on this. But my personal experience was that I as I said before, I had already kind of well before said, okay, so Battler's dead, right? Okay. But for me, it was like, oh, he's not? That's okay. Are we doing this? And then it's like, oh, okay. It's a little weird. You know, actually, oh, okay. Yeah. I was kind of having that sort of thought process. And towards the end of that tea party and, whatnot, or the question mark, the final bit, I actually quite enjoyed it. It wasn't like this sort of like elated, like, wow, this is such a wonderful ending. But it was more like, it's a very poignant way to end this. It's very interesting. I like that. Because for me, it was like there's no real reason for me to care about Tohia, right? But somehow I still like saw it from like the perspective of like, I hope this man gets to like have peace and not be tormented by all of this fucking shit that we've been seeing throughout the whole game, And it gave me like, okay, so basically the meta battler is kind of like, now we finally figured out what that's really representative of. And to me, it's like Tohia and trying to figure out what the hell these memories within him are and what really happened and what's real and what's not between what's being said by the witch hunters or whatever the frauds or what I forgot the name and then just like the sort of like, okay, so it's due to brain damage from like oxygen deprivation because the ship keeled over, blah blah blah, and then the end of like letting go, and then Battler kind of like entering the golden land, which is to say the afterlife, and leaving that, which is it's tragic, of course, and and I do understand what you said before about it being tragic on like a sort of like almost like a mean level of like, did we really again sort of like did we really have to go this far into like kind of like dangling that sort of hope for the character and then taking it out so in such like cruel way, in like, because in a way dying in the blast is less cruel than almost surviving and then not really surviving, but personally I think it's a very like fitting end, and I don't really have any qualms about it personally.
So, I said this before. I still think this. I think it from a in terms of writing it into the plot, I think it makes perfect sense. It it explains so much. It fits with all the things we've been told. It satisfies the things that have been hinted at and foreshadowed, while also not contradicting anything that's been told that can't happen and won't happen. And I think it's done in a way that makes sense. I think it's executed in a way that it's like it's a fitting and fairly appropriate ending to the story. But to explain a bit of why I felt the way I did at the time, and why I still, even if I intellectually accept it, don't emotionally love it, is because at the time I was reading it, I had a similar mindset to you, but in subtly different ways. So I was also like, okay, Battler's dead. Yeah, they're all dead. They're not coming back. It's fine. She's gonna move on. We're all good. And then, like you, I was also like, oh wait, he's back. We're doing this. He's alive. And maybe I just got a little bit more excited over that prospect than you did, because I was like, I love unexpected hope spots. Um, and then, oh wait, no, he's not actually. Oh, that's weird. So then the same as you, but I fixated on the, oh, that's weird, and oh, why can't he come back? Why isn't that him? I never got to that point of, oh, you know what? Okay, sure, I see it. I like this. Is cool. I can vibe with it. I never got to that point because all I could think of was the writer had the choice of what to do. You know, I can't see it, I guess, as oh, well, this man, he just wants to live his own peaceful life unaffected um, by the trauma of the person who used to be in that body. The reason I can't see it that way is because the writer could have written it differently so that that wasn't how he felt.
I guess, yeah. Like in ways that for you would have felt more satisfying, I suppose.
Maybe, I don't know. I don't know if there's a way to do it in a way that's more satisfying. Really, I'm not one to say he should have done it this way. All I'm saying is, it's just, it gives me thoughts of, well, man, we were so close. What could have happened? Even if it makes more sense to do it this way. There's a part of me that just wants to have in my head canon that freaking he just got out and he was fine and he was chill and he came back one day and met her again and he remembered himself.
Yeah.
Or the alternative way, which you hold to the interpretation that Battler escaped alone on a boat and the boat had an accident and he drowned because of that.
Yeah, that's me. That's me. I think so.
Part of the reason I have a hard time sticking to that interpretation is because the storm was over. And also, if Battler died in a boat accident, it would be really extra tragic because that's literally his phobia. So that's tough if it happened that way.
In a way, I would say I'm not entirely sort of like I don't want to say subscribe because that feels like it's like something that either you believe or not. I'm not entirely tied to the idea that Battler escaped on the next day after the storm was over. I almost think it's possible that he tried to leave in the chaos of the storm as well. But that really doesn't matter, change the outcome, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Then there's the interpretation that the scene with Beatrice was a little bit more literal than
Right.
than you might think, and that there actually was a person there that that Beatrice was actually with him, but for various reasons, whether it was the guilt over what she wanted to do or the despair that she might never really get the life she wants, even if she does escape with him, does jump over the side and he goes in after her. And that is, I know at least one other person has said that that's their preferred interpretation. It does make more sense in some ways. It's a beautiful ending for Beatrice because even in her despair of thinking, well, I got out with Battler, but I still can't accept this life. I still think he might never really be able to forge a future with me, and jumping over and then having Battler against all the odds come and be there with her, that is a very beautiful ending for the character, for Beatrice. And it also avoids the Battler dying to his worst fear thing, because it means he chose that. He went and did that himself.
Yeah.
However, there's also reasons to not like that, because it also makes it feel like, damn, Beatrice, what a dick. You got out with him, and you just freaking jumped over, and now both of you are dead.
I think my main thing is that the way I see it as a much more metaphorical thing is, again, the dynamic they have in that scene is not something that they would have in real life. The dynamic is very clearly
not.
the culmination of the fantasy shown as as a sort of like finale of the sort of like the meta layer, Battler and Beatrice, and that's why I think like something like that could have maybe happened, but I don't think it would have happened on the boat like that or something like that. But that's just me.
Mm-hmm. Well, so anyway, so with Battler, in the two scenarios, right? The one with Battler dying in an accident, and one with Battler dying by chasing Beatrice. Both of them are just feel like, we were so close. One, or it could have been different. With the Battler and Beatrice escaping, it's like, come on, I just want a headcanon that she didn't do that, and that they just got out, because it would literally take, all it would take is for her to decide, I'm not gonna just kill myself right now. And then in the other scenario, it makes me think that Battler could have recovered himself, because it wasn't that he went down to die with Beatrice. He just freaking fell over in an accident. And so there is not that thematic, he went down to the bottom of this ocean and died with Beatrice. It's, he just fell over. Okay, can you come back to yourself now sometime? But yeah, I understand it's a bit of a drab, over realistic way of looking at it. Like, it's a very much like thinking about what it would be like if it happened in real life, like thinking, oh man, I wish like things had gone differently, because then we would have had a happier ending. It doesn't really regard the thematicness of Battler never becoming Battler again, and what that means for the metaverse Battler, and what it means for all the other aspects that it affects and makes you recontextualize the story. I'm not really thinking of it from that angle, because I agree, I do think it makes sense from that angle, just from a personal attachment to the character point of view. I'm like, imagine if, I don't want to get into Wheel of Time spoilers, but imagine if a certain character who has a near-death experience and has some differences in their memory afterwards just is a completely different character after that. I would not be that happy about it, even if it would make sense in the story.
I get it.
So it's just, I don't know, it's a personal thing. It's not that I think he wrote it badly. It's not that I think it doesn't make sense. I don't know. I just read a book. I just finished a book where the character at the end of it is at a point where they've sort of gotten a life back for themselves, where they can do certain things, and something they do in this denouement of the epilogue, almost, depending on how you interpreted it, can be very hit or miss about whether you actually think it's an appropriate way to end it. Now, in this context, the actual book doesn't end the character's story, because the author decided to pick up the story some years later, again, which I haven't read that continuation yet. But if this had been the character's full ending, there would have been some aspects where it works thematically, but I can see many readers still not liking it or not feeling fully satisfied by it because of what they value. For me and my attachment to the character and my lens, it worked perfectly, and I would have been mostly fine with that being the ending for the character. But depending on your interpretation, no matter how well it's written, no matter how well it works thematically, no matter how much it satisfies the characters' personalities and everything, sometimes you just don't like what happens.
Yeah. I get it. And it might be something that'll gain more different layers in thought over time, or then you'll stick to your gut feeling.
It's something where I many times I've come close to fully accepting it, and now I'm not salty about it anymore. Now I accept that's the ending, that's what happens, and that's how the author chose to end his story. It's just that when I actively talk about it and think about it, it's still like, I wish that things had been happier. I wish that the character had ended differently. Now, I don't think a happier ending would have been more sensible. I think a happy ending might have felt cheap. To say, make some excuse why Battler never came back, even though he did recall himself. That wouldn't have been really easy to pull off. So no, I accept it. I'm fine with it. I just, when I think about it, it's like, I wish the character had a bit of a happier ending. But I mean, I have no complaints. I have no lingering, I'm not gonna let it make me say that the VN is not a masterpiece. It's not gonna get in the way of me recommending it to other people. It's just an aspect that bugs me a bit, and it's unfortunately something that happens right at the end, so it stinks a bit out more in my memory. But it's like for you, the Kinzo thing, it diminishes your enjoyment in a little bit of a way. Doesn't really prevent you from enjoying the rest of it. It's just that yours moment happened in chapter 7 and mine happened at the very end of chapter 8.
Yeah. I guess it's just a little more unfortunate place, because for me, I have to get into
definitely
the mood of the chapter 8. But perhaps if there's anything, it could have benefited from that being perhaps the normal tea party, and then there being some kind of fantasy tea party after that to remind again of what truly matters in life and what is not perhaps the living or dying, but the friends we make along the way, whatever, kind of a reminder of episode 8's themes after. But it is what it is. To wrap up, let's talk about some of the, just in general, like thoughts and maybe the characters we liked, we disliked. The music is awesome. There's about 200 tracks in the main soundtrack, and I have a playlist on YouTube of just my favorites, and that's 80 songs. So that's a solid.
Yeah.
80 songs would be 40% of the soundtrack is in my favorites.
Yeah,
it's a pretty big percentage.
It is a great soundtrack. It's like so many interesting songs and so many really well done arrangements too. It's like, wow, they really pulled out all the stops for this.
Yeah, it's well produced and everything. It's just nice to listen to.
Yeah,
he got some really good artists for that, and I like some.
Were all these tracks in the original game?
Yeah.
So like with the no voice acting and all the like amateurish art, they had these tracks.
I know, right? At that time it would have been like the most high production part of the whole thing. I like how a lot of the longer tracks, the climactic tracks, are still like I feel like they're still. I haven't heard any of the composers like standalone work, so I can't say if this is just the way they write. But I feel like, especially like the the ZTS tracks, the rave tracks, the big tracks like Golden Slaughterer. I feel like they're written in many ways with a mindfulness towards the written medium, in a way where like Golden Slaughterer, like it doesn't actually have a lot of like of the main melody. That melody. It only plays that for like a little bit, and then a lot of like the like kind of just like development, like just mainly just like harmonic parts, and then maybe repeating that a short time, and then just like the rest of the track is just kind of like slower development, even though it is like a very like I just like that a lot of the tracks are written to not overstate their sort of melodic material, because the reader wants to focus on reading, and it has the melodies, but a lot of the tracks are focused a lot more on more of the the developing part. Like I'm speaking kind of like from a sonata perspective, but the more sort of like atmospheric parts, and I feel like that works pretty well for when you're reading. Like you get the melody, and then you can get back to reading for a while before it repeats the melody again.
I think you put it perfectly. Like that's, I feel like for any background music for while you're reading, like it lets you settle in and it gives you that atmosphere to be back in your subconscious while you're reading, and then it sort of grabs you back with the melody to make you think for a second, oh yeah, this is a banger, and then you get back to reading and it works really well.
Except Birth of a New Witch, that fucking shit slaps. That was in episode 6. I remember I was just watching, I stopped reading and I just went like, yo, wait a minute, hold up, yo, I just went like that. When they're going like, that song. And I'm just like, yo, I'm like dancing to it, hitting the nene.
It's a like amazing soundtrack, and it's really cool how you have so many different artists on this soundtrack, and yet somehow it feels like a coherent vibe, even if there's so many different songs. Some that are more classical, some that are more like electronic, others that are in between, but it somehow creates this vibe that captures everything about Umineko.
Yeah, because it is also a very varied story that still stays together.
Exactly,
so it makes sense.
There's like so many different like facets,
and there's also some like
tones that are used over the course of the writing, so it only makes sense that it would be the same in the music.
Yeah, and there's some repeated themes and motifs that kind of come back eventually. It's not like Undertale, but you definitely notice like the Golden Slaughterer theme and some of the happier themes come back every now and then. And like for example, the Executioner is kind of like an arrangement of Golden Slaughter, stuff like that. And especially this was it? The names are so fucking funny because they're so dumb. But there's like I believe Dream End Discharger at the which plays at the end of episode 4, which is kind of this cool culmination, because the scene is a culmination of the question arcs, and the music also like remixes kind of like parts of World End Dominator and Golden Slaughterer, which are both very iconic tracks of question arcs. So it's just cool how it mirrors the sort of like the energy of the writing, and also. Characters. I love the goats. They're hot.
I clapped for the goats every time they came up in the credits. All the goats.
All of them. They all get the credit. I don't particularly care for the fantasy, the female fantasy characters' designs. I said this from the beginning. And I still kind of do think that the stakes are kind of dumb. I like Mammon because she's a bro for Enji in episode 4. Aside from that, I don't really care for them. The Shiesters are kind of funny. They can live. I'll let them live. Gap is stupid. What is she wearing?
Okay, her outfit has a gap in it. Don't you get it?
Oh my god, I just realized that. Fuck me.
Wait, you didn't realize? No, you.
I didn't realize that it's literally a gap. Yeah, it is true. You're right. You're right. It's very, very, very clever, Ryukishi. I'm still not forgiving him for that, but gives
No,
it
I
more
didn't like. I
context.
didn't love the seven stakes either. Like I think they would have been more tolerable if every scene they're in, they didn't all have to have a line.
Yeah, it's so true. They all have to, and then that makes them more forgettable individually, almost because
Yeah, like they've all
they
got to have a line where they say something related to their own deadly sin, and it's like, okay, we get it. You're greedy. You have lust. You have
you're
anger. You
hungry,
know.
you like food.
Yeah.
The only thing that I remember is Mammon because first of all she was in episode 4 as the main stake with Enji,
Yeah.
and then she says she wants to eat Gora's cooking, and that's funny.
Oh, exactly. Oh, and now we come to the real best character,
Gora,
Umineko.
yes, of course.
Goda.
Let's fucking go. He's funny. He's
Oh,
he's
he's
he's just a, I think he also serves a very important purpose in the story, which is to say he's a servant who's not in on the whole thing.
yeah.
Because everyone else it knows who Beatrice is. He doesn't, so he gets to be clueless and fucking like just goofing,
Yeah,
It's
he's just
good.
hanging around. He's just chilling.
I really fucking love the bit in episode 6 when like Ganon is going into the closet to turn into Shannon, or the other way around. I forgot. No, it's Ganon, and then he's like reminiscing on like Kumasawa, the nice mother figure, Genji, the dependable uncle, Gora. I hate that guy.
Yeah, I think did I screen cap that? I think I did.
Yeah, I think you did.
That was
I was
so funny. I hate
I,
that guy.
I clipped that on Twitch because I was streaming that bit.
Yeah.
It was just it got me laughing. It was really funny. And also best scene is of course the cows versus goat.
Oh yeah, that was
And
classic. Now
I
I honestly don't. I think if someone else, and I hope someone else starts reading Umineko soon, so that I can be in the spectator seat in the
you
theater
get to be in
going
the
seat.
metaverse.
Yeah, but I don't want to tell people in advance, oh, this scene's gonna be great. You got to keep your eyes open. I want them
It's
to
true.
like.
It's
I
true.
think I would have enjoyed the Kraus scene more, which I did. I loved it, but I would have enjoyed it more if I wasn't like thinking, oh, is this the scene? Oh, is this gonna be? Oh, is this gonna be the scene like everyone's talking about? Like,
It's true.
I
It's
think I would
true.
just want to react to that completely, not even knowing there's gonna be a crazy scene, and just be like, oh my god, this is the best on my own completely. But
Yeah, I was in VC for that. I don't remember if people were, if I had that same like, oh, is this gonna be the scene? I don't think I did. I think I was just in general like enjoying because it was around a lot of other stuff too, basically. So like no matter what, there were a lot of scenes going on at that point which were epic, like the battles between like Jessica and George, and then the other stuff when they're escaping from the prison and all that sort of stuff. So it was a very that was like the episode 4 was like, let's just sit around for a while and then let's put in like the most like craziest stuff
yeah.
afterwards. And I don't know what else is there to say. Will is literally me, and
I
think we've said a lot of the intelligence stuff already.
like I think is there anything else that's like I really want to mention? There probably is, and I'm gonna forget like after we start recording. But like
Yeah, that's fine.
I I think I agree that I like most of the characters. I it is interesting how it like it lets it to for the most part it lets you make up your own mind about whether you're going to judge a character or not for doing a certain thing or saying a certain thing or not doing or saying a certain thing. um so like it's not saying like you have to forgive Rosa for the way she treats Maria, for example. um it generally is like, you you aren't supposed to love or hate any certain characters. It's just presenting them to you and saying, okay, you can use your best judgment, which is generally good. Um, but it also does towards the end like try to say, oh, you should be like sympathetic to all the family members, and they mean well, but it's like that's also kind of hard to do when you know how Rosa treats Maria, and you know what Kinzo did, and you know that like Eva is pretty controlling of George, and you know that like that's basically about it, because everyone else is pretty much fine. Like Rudolph and Kyrie, unless they're secretly sociopathic murderers, pretty fine. Even if Rudolph is a bit of a cad. Kraus and Natsuhi, Kraus, man, she's like, you gotta trust your wife a bit more, man. That's all. But
Yeah.
aside from that, they're chill. They have some good moments together. Um, Even Hideyoshi, their relationship is great.
Hideyoshi is probably one of the most wholesome adults.
Oh yeah, Hideyoshi. Out of all the adults, I think he is I think he is the best person out of all the adults.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
Personally, I'm always rooting for Kirie because I just like the fact that she's like the cool stepmom.
oh, I know. I think she's the best. I just think Hideyoshi is technically a better person.
Oh sure.
Like
Yeah.
even though Kirie, I don't think she's a sociopath who doesn't love her daughter.
I don't think so. I really don't. I think that's just.
Yeah.
I think it's silly.
So I think, like, even given that, she's definitely like,
She's still like a capitalist for sure, who's like kind of like very, very much like
she's still a pretty
competitive.
ruthless person, but like I like her. I like her as a character. I wouldn't be playing her in Objective if I didn't like her as a character.
That's very true.
Who else? I think Natsuhi deserves so much better.
I like that Natsui got another like shot in the limelight in episode 5.
Yeah.
And I like that she was shown to also be a magic kind of understander.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a really nice sort of like contrast to how it was kind of seen as a kid thing.
Yeah.
But then it showed like she also could use it to just like
Conjure up
separate her
Kinzo.
thoughts and just so Berenkastel is kind of I don't really like her that much. Not like I mean obviously she's a villain, but also I don't think she's like one of the more interesting characters because she's very sort of muted as a personality. I think Lambda Delta, because in the beginning I had the opposite thought.
I was the same. I think I said this in my chat. Like, oh, Bern Castell's kind of chill. She's like helping out, and she's like kind of like
Lambda
low
is
key.
annoying.
And Lambda is just annoying. But I completely flipped by the end.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it is meant to be that way, but I think it's interesting how, like, first me at the start can't hate these anime bitches. Me at the end, me and the bestie.
Yeah.
And
Lambda came in clutch at the end. I wasn't expecting to like her, but yeah.
I liked it. She had some nice character progression.
Yeah.
Which is in general very hard to do in a story like this.
Yeah.
I liked, of course, for me, Maria is probably my favorite of the main Ushiromiya family, just because I just really like like her stuff always resonated with me, and I think like she's the most tragic in the way of like how she didn't get to live a full life.
Yeah.
And the way like we see her grimoire and stuff like that. Aside from the Ushiромiyas, I think like Beatrice and then like Will and Leon are some of my favorites. But yeah, and of course I do like Battler. He's a little bitches punk, but he's fun.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I like Battler. I sympathize with him a lot, and I mean, I also got mad at him plenty of times, like, you freaking dumbass, but like in the end,
but that's a part of the whole arc,
Yeah.
I think it makes sense that you would. I think it's just good writing to have you kind of like not, there's times when you hate, and you want to scream and tear his hair off, and there are times when you're like, let's go,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you'd like You'd like the Farseer trilogy.
Interesting.
That's a protagonist like that. But yeah, I want to wear Battler's suit.
Oh,
he's got a great
pretty
drip.
drippy suit. Yeah,
he's got good drip.
Yeah, I think in general,
Rudolph's drip is also pretty good. I like the purple suit.
They all have pretty good drip.
Yeah.
I really like the designs of the Ushiromiya family. They're not too like over the top anime, but they're still have their unique stuff, like Battler's cross zipper on his suit. But I just realized he has a fucking zipper on his suit. That's so fucking funny.
Yeah. I don't think if I was gonna cosplay Battler, I don't think I'd get a zipper suit.
Where can you even get that? That would have to be a custom thing.
Yeah.
A zipper suit. That is pretty funny.
Zipper. Maybe that's why he said it was a cheap suit.
Honestly, that fits Battler's personality. He would have a suit with a fucking zipper on it. Fucking tuxedo with a zipper. All right. We've been going at this for about 2.5 hours, a little less, maybe 2 hours 20 minutes altogether with things cut off. So, all right, it's good. I like it.
It might even be Kino.
It might even. Well, it's not Kino, but it's what would be the equivalent term for?
Whatever is German for visual novel.
Yeah. Either way, it's epic. It's not technically epic. It's not an epic, but it is epic.
Yeah, it's a sort of work that makes me inspired to write, because it's like it's great and it's a incredibly monumental thing, but I also like there's things it's like, oh man, I would do that differently. Not like to write the same thing, but do it differently, but to write my own work. I could
do this better.
No,
they should have hired
like
me to write this. No, I know.
In a way that like, oh, I want to write a story that has the same, hits the same, but like, does things in my way.
So you mean Knives Out, Glass Onion?
Exactly. I am Rian Johnson.
I am. Wait, what did you say that with Benoit Blanc's voice?
Did I? I should have.
I'm really glad that.
Well, you got me. That's not Benoit
Daniel
Blanc.
Craig wants to play, or is fine with playing Benoit Blanc for the rest of his life. Apparently.
If you could play one character for the rest of your life, Benoit Blanc is a pretty good one.
I think it's just he just likes it after all the Bond stuff,
Oh yeah. I would.
Now, Halle Berry, this mansion is truly something else. But just a moment, I could not help but overhear.
You're saying how many tons of gold?
I could not help but hear that you said that there are no more than 18 people on this island. Now, I don't mean to be rude, but I just thought that quite interesting when clearly we have only seen 17 so far. Not to mention the titular family patriarch is nowhere to be found. Now, interesting smell I heard from the incinerator, though. I mean, smell I heard. Smelled.
Smell I heard. Right. He would hear a smell. Reminds me of when we were playing CSGO with my friends, and someone always references when one of my friends says, dude, you're blind if you didn't hear that. When I was at university, we had this group of orientation week leaders who would be like intimidating the first years, and we would tell them, they're selected out of the top 2% of their class. They can all bench press 300 pounds. They can smell colors you can't even see.
That's very poetic.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's a good sign that we can close this off. So
I think so.
Do you have a YouTube?
I'm glad you had me on.
Do you have a YouTube channel they can subscribe to? Do you put stuff on your YouTube channel?
Yeah, I do have a Dirty Spaceman YouTube channel.
I'll link you anyway, and you can subscribe to Steve Gunner to see more of his stuff.
Yeah, my one rip that I made in the last like 2 years. Yeah.
Trust me.
Oh, hey, maybe I mean, I write some stuff on it. I write some stuff for Steve Gunner sometimes.
Well, that's more what I meant. I haven't really made a rip, unless you count like stuff in King for a Day, which is more just like arranging stuff and playing it on accordion. I haven't like made a rip since January 2017.
Oh, that's 6 years ago.
6 years ago. It's been a while. Other than that, it's just like yeah. Okay. Thank you guys for listening. For the 2 people who are still left at this hour of the day. And I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.
Bye.